this thing in the world is, the Gemara says, if a person could be, digging for jewels and digging for gold, and he becomes a garbage collector, it's heartbreaking. What's wrong with this garbage collector instead of being digging for gold? Because Baruch began saying it a little bit. That he doesn't know who he is, right? He doesn't know what he can do. You know what we all suffer from? It's so much so true. We all suffer from that. We don't have the faintest idea what we could do. Listen, if I would go up to a little slave in Egypt and say, listen, brother, do you think that you're capable of standing on Mount Sinai, God talking to you? First he'd say no, right? But then I'd convince him he is capable. And I'd ask him, how long would it take you to get yourself to the level that God should be able to talk to you? He'll say years. The truth is it took exactly 7 weeks, right? And I'll tell you something else. The truth is that the first night of the Seder was mamish on the level like Mount Sinai. There was only it that it was taken away from us. Now I want you to know something very deep. The whole thing of counting the Omer is because the first night of Seder was mamish God opened all the gates of heaven. Then he took it away. And then he says, okay, work on it yourself. Reach that light. And then we worked for 7 weeks, we reached that level, and God spoke to us. It took us 7 weeks. So the thing is like this. When, according to the Gemara, when did the exile of the 400 years of Egypt begin? It began with the birth of Yitzchak. The birth of Yitzchak, because Yitzchak was the first Jew who was born, and he was born in Israel, although he was born in Israel, but the land didn't belong to Avraham Avinu. So it was called that he was already a stranger. Yitzchak was already a stranger. The first Jew was born as a stranger. So the whole thing of Egypt was because the first Jew who was born a Jew, what it means he was born a Jew? That means his roots are Jewish. It means his roots are holy, right? And being in Egypt means that he lose touch with your roots. But the long term, I don't want to go into it too long. Avraham Avinu was a holy Jew, but he was a Jew by choice, right? Not the roots. Yitzchak was the first Yiddish who got his Yiddishkeit was by roots, right? Not by choice. So the truth is, Yaakov Avinu had both, right? Mamish, the Klal Yisrael begins from Yaakov, who was both, right? He had Avraham Avinu, right? The Jew by choice, and also Yitzchak, the Jew by roots, right? Has to be both, right? Then begins Yaakov, Mamish, really, And after you're both, you're by choice and by roots, then it begins, right? Mamish Gewalt, there are a lot of people who are Jew by roots and some are Jew by choice. It's very sweet, but it's not real yet. It has to be both, right? But anyway, to go through this whole thing until you come out from Egypt takes you a long time till you get to it, It takes 400 years with pain and slavery till you get to that level, Mamish, to know exactly what it is. Then you come out and Mamish know I'm a Jew and I am standing on Mount Sinai. But you know what it is? If we would know how holy we are, what we can do, Mamish would do different things. We don't know what level we are. That's slavery, I forgot my roots, I forgot my choice, I forgot everything. Yeah, I know it, but I know it I don't know it. The Maharal says, slave and not slave is if my soul is completely in action, right? That's called completely free. Everything of me is working. According to the Maharal, let's say if I'm, God forbid, if a person is well, only his foot is not working. The Maharal says it's a slave. Because how come the foot isn't working, right? According to the Maharal, being sick means being a slave in a certain way, because one part of me isn't working. It's not real. I'm not completely there. It's like a Gewalt, The world always thinks slave, freedom means someone stands up and with a whip, I can't get a job, it's stupid. This isn't where it's at, Anyway, Pesach, the whole thing is that mamish, the great light is shining, and I know again who I am. And that gets me out of Egypt in a second. And I'm not hung up on those little things I'm doing. Because I can only build pyramids for Pharaoh until I know exactly what I can do. The moment I know that I can go up to Mount Sinai and talk to God, even Pharaoh can't hold me back anymore. I'm saying this, without getting involved with some of our kids, I include myself, all of us. But sad enough, some of the kids, mamish, they don't know what they can do, They don't know what they can do, so later. Even the house, without getting involved, the house could be in the highest level, And it isn't not because of any badness, but because everybody doesn't know how high they could reach, It's the truth, How much sad, None of us, So maybe this Pesach, I hope it got help, Now listen to this very deep. What does it mean to know what I can do? To be completely aware of the depths of my life. A dead person can do anything, right? So the less I can do, that means I'm closer to death than to life, right? Because a dead person can do anything, right? The more I'm alive, the more I can do, right? If I can reach the highest level, it means I'm utmost alive, right? You see, the question of being a slave and not being a slave, it's a question of what life level are you on, right? Are you on the level of a slave? I can do this, I can't do this. A slave Yidden thinks I can only daven a little bit and not so much. A free Yidden knows I can knock off a daven like the Holy Baal Shem. Listen, I'll tell you, it's the greatest story in the world. Michael Zoshua had 7 sons, and one of them was Rabbi Yosele Miyam Polen. Anyway, the story is that Rabbi Yosele Miyam Polen was very sick, mamish gefährlich sick. And then, mamish, he nearly died. And then suddenly, while he nearly died, he began sweating and he really got well. He sweated for 2 hours, sweated out all the sickness. After 2 hours, he opened his eyes, he says, folks, I'm okay. So what happened? He said, this is what happened. He says, Imam died. He came up to heaven. And they brought in all his prayers, and people in heaven said, well, this is praying. So they wanted Mamish to keep him there. Suddenly, says the Holy Baal Shem Tov walked in and he said, what's going on here? They said, this Yosele didn't daven properly. He says, you're telling me about my Yosele? He says, Yosele, do me a favor, knock off a little maraf, Show them what you can do, So he says, I began to daven maraf in heaven, Mamish was all my soul, and I was sweating like a dog, While he was sweating from this maraf, he sweated out his sickness, It's a very deep story, You need someone like the Holy Baal Shem, one good friend to tell you, listen, brother, you can do it, just sweat it out, You can do it, Okay, how does the book of Exodus begin? You have to know your name, What gets you out of Egypt? Your name. You have to know who you are. Because the name is not just a nickname, but the name, if I know my name, that means I really know who I am, right? I just want to tell a few minutes this one here. Something very strong, If I think I need a cab to get from here to the medical center, right? Because I'm so schwach. It's possible, right? But if I would be completely alive, as soon as I can get there, I don't need a cab, right? I don't want to say bad things, but a lot of kids think they need outside help to get somewhere, What do you need outside help for, Just get there, Hope you know what I mean by this. No, it's stupid, That means it's mamish slavery. It's absolute slavery. And I'll tell you something else. A slave, the saddest thing about a slave is he has about 10,000 excuses for everything. Remember what he said. What is the biggest slavery in the world? Excuses, right? They might be real. Maybe they might be true. Listen, Pharaoh had an excuse also to make us slaves, the economy of the country, right? They had no excuses for the war in Vietnam. The economy absolutely needed a little war, and it was better. I mean, maybe for the economy it would have been better to make a war between Ohio and Iowa, but just you couldn't get to it. I let it be in Vietnam, you know. They had excuses, but the world doesn't run on excuses. Okay, now listen to something very deep. This is Gewalt. Reb Nachman says, what is the whole thing of Egypt? You know, not only getting out my emotions from Egypt, my mind out of Egypt. You have to realize one thing, that bread is very closely attached to my mind. Because the Zohar Kodesh says that the baby does not know who his father and his mother until it eats bread. That means mamish bread really gives strength to my mind. Then I know what it's all about. You know? I know who my father and mother is. I know what it's all about in this world. So matzah is mamish, gives me back my strong mind. You know, I should know what it's all about. So Reb Nachman says that there's a slave mind and a free mind. A slave mind has mamish about 10,000 excuses. You know. That's right. Listen, everybody is drowned in something. You know? And the whole thing of Egypt is to get out of what you're drowned in. Everybody is tied to something, chained to something. Nobody knows about it. But then everybody has to have Rachmanas compassion on his own soul and just get out of it. You have to know, he says something very strong. While the 10 plagues are taking place, everybody goes through 10 plagues. You know, you're waking up and you think you should go. But you're still in Egypt. It's not so hard. The last night, you know, that night we left you, it's the hardest test in the world. Mamish, to leave the things you're tied to. Mamish, to leave all the things you had excuses with. And to get out of it, this is the hardest, the greatest test in the world, you know. So Reb Nachman says, you know, you have to realize one thing. Standing on Mount Sinai was not a test. Why not? I'm standing there, I blow my mind, I see the greatest light in the world, and God talks to me, you know? Why not? You know? To get out of Egypt. You know? And you have to realize one thing, that every second, you know, was just I was playing with my own life, because God forbid, if I'm not strong enough, I'm staying. Right? Utmost test. You know? Therefore, he says something very strong. How do you get out of Egypt fast? It says, you know, you have to go out fast. Don't think. You know what it takes the strongest mind is? When my mind says to me, mind, stop thinking. Right now is no time for thinking, just do it. That's it. That means my mind is so strong. I'll tell you something very deep. You know, in relation between people also, you know. If I hold someone by the goggle, I'm not very close to them, right? If I'm completely close to them, I don't have to hold on to them, right? I can let them free. You know, strong enough, you know. Let's say jealousy always comes from not being so sure about each other. Right? Gotta grab them by the neck, right? If the relationship is not much very deep, you know, I can trust, right? So the thing is like this. What is the strongest? What does matzah do to my mind? My mind tells my mind, let go, you know. Let go. It's okay, you know. I know what to do. So the mind tells the mind with the aid of matzah, right? You need matzah. Because the question is very deep. We got out of Egypt after midnight only. How come we eat matzah before midnight? So this is what the answer is. Because who gives me the strength to get out from Egypt after midnight? It's the hardest test in the world. I need a strong mind, absolutely strong mind, to see clear truth that I was only in Egypt because I was excusing myself. Right? And it might be true excuses. Right? So matzah gives me such a strong mind, mamish, a super mind, that I know it's crazy. I can get out of Egypt right this minute, nobody stops me. This is the greatest light in the world. It's the greatest light in the world. Gives me the strength to get out of Egypt. And this is matzah. But what is the hardest thing in the world? Listen to this. Everybody needs something to hold on to, right? Everybody has little things we're holding on to. What is the utmost we are holding on to is to a little piece of bread, because everybody really needs bread, right? The holiness of leaving Egypt is, we walked out of Egypt without bread. We walked out into the desert, we had nothing to hold on to. Do you know what a strong mind I need to leave a place without? You know, I can leave my job, I have another job, right? I can leave one little habit if I have another little habit, right? Everybody needs something small to hold on to. But here, I come out from Egypt, I'm not taking anything with me, you know? And this is absolute freedom. But yet you have to know, I get out of Egypt fast. It has to be that night, because if I'm God forbid waiting more than that night, it's too late. Okay, Reb Nachman says, Al-Kain tzrichem nesalek daita legamre. The greatest cleverness means not to think. To be clever enough to know I'm not thinking. You see, when I walk, have you ever... Listen to this. Very strong. Reb Nachman says unbelievably deep. When I'm thinking, can I walk fast or slow? How fast can I walk while I'm thinking? Very slow. You know, you see when you talk to someone really engrossed in a conversation, you walk slowly, right? If you want to run, you have to stop thinking. Like a Gewalt, you know? How do you run out of Egypt? Your mind tells you don't think. My mind is so strong to stop my mind. So therefore he says matzah is called the bread of poverty. Why is it called poverty? Because poverty means if I have no mind, right? I stop thinking. I'm not thinking. I'm poor. I have no mind. But the matzah, my mind is so strong that my mind tells me stop thinking. You know, be poor for a minute. Don't think. You know, it's like a Gewalt, you know. Because the Gemara says, "Ein oni ele bedas," a poor man means someone who doesn't think, right? So Pesach, I'm so strong. I say to myself, I want to be poor. I got to get out of Egypt and fast. It's like a Gewalt, you know. Then he says again, the whole difference is chometz takes a long time. It's a slow process. Matzah is fast again, you know. Matzah, the holiness of matzah is I'm running. You know? I'm telling my mind, stop. I don't care. It has to be done. It has to be done. And therefore he says Pesach is a celebration of believing. Matzah is called Michle de Asvosa, the bread of believing, because it takes a lot of believing to believe that this is what I have to do. Very strong believing. A lot of people know what they know, but if they don't believe in it, then the mind keeps on going, right? So, Pesach night, I believe so strong, I'm just doing it. Piece of bread in a certain way has at least a certain, you know, in a certain shape. Something. Matzah it actually has no shape. It's just water and flour. You put it there, you put it strong, and you eat it, right? There's no. It's just like this light with anything live, when it has vessels, that means it has a certain shape. What's vessel? Shape, right? Matzah is light without a shape. Light without vessels. That means the light is so deep, I don't have vessels for it. I don't know. It's beyond vessels. It's just shining. I don't understand it. I know the light is there. That's Exodus out of Egypt. You know, sometimes we know something deep in our hearts. I really don't know what it is. But I don't have the strength to follow it because I'm a slave. Pesach night, something so deep is shining. I have no vessels for it because it's only like matzah. I don't understand it. I have no vessels even to understand it. But I just follow it. He says, when we stood on Mount Sinai, God gave us vessels for this great light. Because the Torah is vessels for the great light. Pesach is a light without vessels, like a valve. You know? Just a great light, you know. And therefore we drink like wine, we're a little bit drunk. I don't know what's going on, you know. In other words, like this, Pesach is mamish, the whole Yom Tov, according to Reb Nachman, is mamish like whatever you'd call it, subconscious or below conscious, above conscious. You know, all those things which are going on so deep in my mind. But all the time my mind is stopping me. Right? In Pesach, I'm strong enough to put my mind aside. I'm not a slave to what my little mind tells me here, because I know what's going on inside and above and is much deeper than all this. Right? I eat matzah, and mama's great light is shining. I have no vessels, I have no words for it. I don't know what it is, but I'm just going. Now I'll tell you something even deeper. Reb Nachman says, what is the greatest evil? Evil says to you, wait, Chabnish, let's talk about it, right? Yeah, let's discuss it. He says, that's chometz, right? Chometz says what? It takes a long time. Bread, you know, you want to eat bread, yeah, but let's talk about it. It takes half an hour till the meat goes out, you know. Matzah says, I have no time to talk about it. Just throw it in the oven and I go. You know? It's a gewalt, you know? What? It's mamish top, you know? I don't even talk to my friend about it, I just do it. Because if I talk to somebody else, it takes already time. Listen to this. Time is always a vessel, right? Pesach is no time, right? Matzah is no vessel because there's no time involved. In fact, it's beyond time. That means Pesach, I'm turned on to the utmost of beyond time and space. To the utmost. And then Shavuos, God gives me vessels for all these great lights. Later on, give me vessels. Pesach, I have no vessels. You know? Because the truth is, to get out of slavery, you cannot get out of vessels, right? You don't get out of vessels. If I walk out from Egypt and someone gives me a meal in my hand and walk out, I'm a slave, I'll never get out of it, right? I have nothing. I'm just... Listen, kids, I just want to wish you a good Pesach. You know, we should get out of our Egypt. Everybody, I'll be drowned in Egypt. In good Egypts, you know, everybody has excuses for the Egypts. You know, that's just, you see, Chassidus makes it very clear. Egypt doesn't have to be a low Egypt, you know, in mud. It might be a very holy Egypt, but it's still Egypt. You know? Because if you can be better, if you don't know your name, you're in Egypt. If you don't know who you could be, who you can be, right? The beginning of Shemais is the Eilish, I know my name, I know what I can be. And that gets me out of Egypt. And the whole thing, Rab Tzadok HaKohen says, the whole thing, slavery begins with Yitzchak, that I lost my roots, right? I'm not in touch with my roots. And getting out of Egypt is, because my roots are deeper than my mind, right? My roots are much deeper than my mind. So Pesach is mamish root work, right? And when my roots like knock into me a little bit, begin working on me a little bit, then my mind is strong enough from the matzah I ate, you know, makes my mind so strong that my mind can let loose. Say, okay, I won't think, I promise. But then the Kotzker Rebbe says, imagine how deep your mind becomes after you don't think, you know? You know, this is very deep. my mind can be trained by a lot of thinking. My mind becomes deep, right? And then there's a certain depth my mind can reach by not thinking. Meaning like this: if I study a lot and I think a lot, then my mind is always deeper. Then that means my mind can make more and more vessels for light which can have vessels. But what about the light which has no vessels? How can my mind be a vessel for that light? My mind can become a vessel for that light if I stop thinking. In a holy way, not just because I'm too stupid. I'm so clever that I'm not thinking. And then after that, this great light is shining, and suddenly I make vessels for that too. What do you say, Maharal? What? Without vessels. And in Matzah is no vessels. Everything is no vessels, Pesach, more. But who needs vessels, most people say, how can you have a light without vessels, right? Listen, how can you drink coffee without a cup, right? Well, where do you put it, right? But this is a slave. A free person, where does it say I need a cup to drink coffee, right? So it says, okay, there's one God. If you don't have a mind, how do you know in your mind? That's only a question of a slave. A free man says, my mind knows without mind. It's like a vault, Anyway, Pesach is mamish, it's so deep. Listen, I want to make fast Kiddush Levanah. Yeah, let's go out and let's make it strong. What? Very strong, This month is tremendous because this was the first month when the Yiddelach were told the laws of the new month, That means the month when the moon is coming out, Chodesh Nisan, the first time the Yiddelach got together and they're greeting the new moon, That's really new, Rosh Chodesh, It's Gewalt, Okay, la 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 la. A good man, a holy man today. We shall have vessels for this holy newness. Okay, Mazel Tov for Holy Joe again, Holy Rabbi Yosef, Mazel Tov to everybody, Mazel Tov for the whole world. Mazel Tov, a good Yom Tov, good Matzahs, a good Morah, good Seder to the world. And Matzahs for the watching Yiddelach, they have it so hard getting them the Charutis of Matzah, the sensitive Matzahs, even. means that with all the newness you're waiting for, you still think that the old light is bigger, you know? We're happy with the little new moon, you know, we know all about newness, but we still think the sun is still stronger, you know? Someday we'll know that one little new spark is better than the whole sun, you know? But the Mashiach is coming, you know? Like, we don't know the holiness of newness, you know? Never know. Maybe one krechts one day, you know, one new krechts, one new sigh, you know? Maybe it's better than my last Yom Kippur, I don't know, you know? But I wouldn't admit it to myself, you know, because I'm supposed to think that the sun is the biggest, right? No, there's a passage in Kelos that says, if you say that the old days were better, then you didn't ask out of wisdom. You didn't ask as Chochmah, you know? It's a very strong passage. The Holy Pshivka would always, that was his passage he was talking about, you know? If you say yesterday was better, you're not in the level of wisdom, you know? It's a passage in the in Kelos, but it was on his lips all the time, you know? It's hard to stomach, you know? No. Because brother, I saw you and you're a shooting star. That's why the stars are so small, you know? Because it's so high up, so they feel so small, that's why they look so small. Tremendous. You know why the birds are flying? Because they sing all the time. Is it tremendous? This is mamish a classic thing of the Baal Shem Tov. Shem Tov says like this: when you look up, it looks close. When you look down, it looks far. Because the truth is, from here to the stars is, you know, millions. I don't know, billions. I have no conception, right? And they look close. Then you stand on top of a mountain, you look down on the valley, it looks very far. It really is not so far, you know? It depends if you look up or down. He says, if you look down at a person, they look far from you. If you look up to them, they look very close, you know? If you look up at yourself, you're close. If you look down at yourself, you're far. It's mamish a gewalt, you know? He says something very, very deep. As a posuk hashkifo and habito, you know. Hashkifo means to look up, you know. And to look down. It depends how God looks at us also, you know. God looks down at us. God looks up to us. Wow, should I depends. If you look up to God, he looks up to us. If you look down, there's something very strong, you know, looking up or looking down. The Holy Strelitzke, you know, everybody knows, was top pupil of the Holy Kalina. But then, never the Holy Kalina passed away. So, at one time, the Holy Kalina said, Ramolchen Shchiza is an Erlich Yid, you know, as a real Yidala, an Erlich Yid. He decided, I'll go there. He was there for 3 years, and mamish strong. And then one day he wanted to see what's really going on there, inside, you know. So he decided to hide himself in the closet and left the door open a little bit. Okay, he saw people coming in, you know, asking for blessings, and he spoke to them. Suddenly the door opened and a real sinner man, you know, you could see the word sin written all over him. So he wanted to jump out from the closet and get him by his throat and say, chutzpah, you know, even to come into the Rebbe. But he thought, oh, I'm waiting, the Rebbe is going to throw him out, that thief, disgusting creature. So then he saw, not only didn't throw him out, Ramotchela got up and mamish embraced him and was so happy with him, so he couldn't hold back anymore. And he says, Rebbe, not only you're not throwing him out, you're even happy to see him, you know? What's going on here, you know? So he says, Uri, he says, you don't deserve even to be under my roof, get out fast, you know? So the Rebbe says not to be under his roof, you know, so mamish. He listens to him. He ran out fast, and for 4 weeks he didn't even go to the synagogue because the synagogue was under the same roof. You know? because if you offend your Rebbe like you for 4 weeks, you're like in exile, So after 4 weeks, Ramotchele called him back and he says, Uri, he says, until you learn Mamish to Freizach, Mamish to be happy, with every little Yidele, you'll never be a Rebbe, Until you learn that. It's a Gewalt, Mamish, sich zu freien, to be happy, to see him, Even the most obnoxious sinner, he says, won't be a Rebbe. But anyway, he learned it. Obviously, he learned it. Very strong. I'll tell you something, the Strelitzke Chassidim, I'll tell you 2 stories about the Strelitzke Chassidim had a little besmedrish in Lemberg, This is a true story because there was a big Strelitzke Chassid, his name was Rav Wovche. That was his name. And everybody knows, until the war now, there was a little besmedrish, Rav Wovche's besmedrish. But at the story when it took place, who wants to have Strelitzke Chassidim, at that time? Because we were making so much noise, we were almost yelling every word down, and you thought there's a war, So finally they got themselves a little besmedrish, a little room right near the marketplace. I thought there's so much noise in the marketplace, so who would know? So we'll daven there. So one day the mayor of the city of Lemberg, walks around in the marketplace. He passed by the street, he sees noise, he thought there must be, God forbid, an atomic explosion. He asked the people, what's going on there? They say there's 10 Yiddelach. He says, 10 Jews can make so much noise. Unbelievable. I got to see this, He walks up, but when they davened, they were mamish out of this world, Their talus was over their head and they were mamish out. So he thought it's the biggest chutzpah I've ever seen in my whole life, 10 Yiddelach making that much noise. So he sent them a letter, an official letter, and Lemberg belonged to Austria, it's written in German, that he gives them 2 weeks to evacuate the synagogue. But they couldn't read German, and who bothered? So they put it somewhere in a book, and they didn't bother. 2 weeks later, listen to this. 2 weeks later, the mayor comes back. He wants to see if they evacuated the synagogue. He came back on Shabbos. So if they made noise during the week, is one thing. On Shabbos, especially when it comes to Nishmas, the mamish. Anyway, so he thought it's terrible. He called the police and soldiers, and he walked up to the synagogue. He took out all the books in the Sefer Torah, and they didn't feel anything because they were davening Nishmas, Mamish didn't know anything. And they didn't even know. They finished davening Shachas, and then they go to the Orna Kodesh to take out the Torah. Suddenly they saw there's no Torah. It's davening. It's one way, one story. The other story I want to tell you is that the holy Kosovo was the holy Strelitzke's brother-in-law. His Chassidim were very holy, but they were not completely out of this world. The vision of his grandfather. So he said to the Strelitzke, he says, how come your Chassidim are such schleppers? Everybody has torn pants, and not one of them has a clean shirt. It's mamish gefährlich. Can't you just see to it? They should. He says, Strelitzke says, I'll tell you. The truth is, for my Chassidim, all the gates of heaven are open. If they would ask for it, they'd get it, but they never ask for it. So he says, you don't believe me? Let's try. The Holy Strelitzke goes to the Smerish and he says, right now the gates of heaven are open. Everybody can... What? He says, everybody can come up and ask me for a good wish. And the Kosovo was sitting next to him. So one Kosovo comes and he says, I should have mamish, a holy Shabbos, Chweis, the other one was asking Chweis, I should know the secret of matzahs. The other one comes, he says, mamish, I should know how to daven, and the other one says, I know how to learn. Not one of the Chassidim asked him for anything in this world. Not one of them. So Strela says to Kosovo, you see, this is my Chassidim. It's a Gewalt, that not one person should ask for anything in this world. One of Chassidim asked, once in my lifetime I should be blessed to say Baruch She'omer as you say it, to the Rebbe. It's a Gewalt, Listen to this. Yeah? Really well. The South had a friend and they swore to each other whoever leaves first this will come back to tell the other what's going on up there. That's a way out story. And the Mamish came back after 20 years.
open my heart to know what
No. What? Oh, Pesach, come here fast, brother. Okay, let's go, strong. Oi. So.
Oi, Pesach.
Okay, a good Chodesh to Pesach. And a good Pesach to the Chodesh. I want to tell you this story, which is going to talk about. Pesach, come here. You want to hear the greatest story in the world? Pesach, come and tell you the greatest story in the world. This is mamish a story which is mamish a sign, mamish, like really the connection between this world and the coming world, by the Tzadikim. The holy Ropshitzer had a little granddaughter. Her name was Weiss Fegele. Yeah, I had a little granddaughter, Fegele. And, all the Ropshitzer children were very sharp kids, So there was, the Ropshitzer was writing a newspaper Torah, and he had a sofer who was writing the Torah. And she was hanging around the whole time. So he told her, don't hang around so much here, because if you push me, if I'm writing, and she pushes him, she plays around with him. It's very sweet, but at a certain point it got on his nerves. He says, do me a favor, when you push me a little bit, and I have to erase the whole thing and I have to write all over again. He says, so please, So she didn't listen, she started pushing him again. So Mama, she didn't have koich anymore, he gave her a little slap. So she began crying and she says, I'll never forgive you. Anyway, listen to this. And she was crying. So she went into the Holy Grandfather Ropshitzer and he asked her, why are you crying? She says, because the sofer slapped me. Gave me a little slap. He says to her, what did you say? So I said, I'll never forgive him. He says, okay, so don't. Listen. And the most unbelievable thing. The sofer, that Fegele was 3 years old or 4 years old, and the sofer was an alt Yidele 50 years old. So he passed away. Fegele lived until she was 95. One day the Holy Shineve came to Fegele. Shineve was already a big Rebbe. It was most probably 60, 70 years later, or maybe 80 years later. He says, last night the sofer came to me. And he says that Mama, she corrected already all the things he did wrong in his life, It was 50 years, Mama, she went through everything, corrected it. The only thing which stops him from getting into heaven is because he didn't forgive him yet for the slap. So he asked me to please ask you to forgive him. For Gewalt, First of all, she said that shows the level of the Shineva, right? Because this is definitely that you heard it from the coming world, because she never told anybody. And actually, in the Ropshitzer didn't tell him because the Shineva didn't see the Ropshitzer, or maybe did, but he didn't tell him. That means Mamish, the sofer, came from heaven. Okay, go out. Tell you one more sweet little story, then I gotta go. The thing is, remember we heard it in... Oh, you were with us in Bobov that Saturday night. Yeah, you were also there. It was a good story. But anyway, Borchel didn't hear it, some of your kids. Oh, Borchel were also with us? No. Yoslo was there. Maybe he did, or you went there. Anyway, listen to this. Yeah. It's a good story, listen to this. The holy Reb Tzvi Melech, was on his way to, from Dinev to Lublin, takes 2 or 3 months if you walk. Anyway, so from Dinev is in Mamish all the way in Galicia, Lublin is Mamish Congress, Poland, real Poland. Takes about 3 or 4 months. So he was prepared to walk for 3 or 4 months, a holy little schlepper, you walk. Suddenly he just walked a few miles out of Dinev, this real rich man passes by, and he gives him a little sign, wants to have a little hitchele, so he says, where are you going? He says, I'm going to Lublin. The rich man says, Dinev says, Gewalt, I'm also going to Lublin. If you give me a lift, it will save me so much time, that means I can be a few weeks longer in Lublin. Why not? And it's really sweet to him, gives him a little bread and a little cake and a little whiskey, and talk to each other. So the Dinner says to him, "You're so good to me, I'll be good to you, Lublin. I'll talk to the Lublin about you, I'll do you a favor with the Sea of Lublin." Richman thought, the biggest chutzpah in the world I've ever seen, I'm the richest man. I'm coming into Lublin. All the doors are open for me. I need this schlepper to do me a favor, So he says, it's a big chutzpah, but I'll forgive you. Dinner says, "I'll do you a favor in Lublin." And each time the rich man heard it, they wanted to grab him and throw him out of the way, whatever. So all the 3 weeks, while he was feeding him a little bit, each time whenever he gave him a little bit of whiskey and cake, he would say, "I won't forget it. I'll do you a favor in Lublin." And each time he says, "I really absolutely don't need your favors, Well, the dinner man did his thing, he did his thing. So anyway, they're arriving in Lublin. Never the rich man goes to a hotel, take a bath and get himself all dressed up, Shabbos tickets to see Lublina. The dinner has nowhere to go, so he goes straight to the Lublina. So the rich man is all dressed up and Shabbos ticket, goes to the mikveh, prepares to go to the Lublina. He wants to walk in. They say, "No, you can't walk in now. Someone is in there. Very important." So it takes 1 hour, 3 hours, 4 hours. He looks, what's going on? He looks through the hole. He sees his little schlepper is in there, So he had a little bit more respect. Obviously he's not. Suddenly the door opens and the dinner says to the rich man, "Come in." And the Chidra was married for 18 years and didn't have children yet. God forbid. So he goes into Lublina. Lublina reads Yaakov and Sola. He says, "Yeah," he says, "I see you can have children, but they'll die, God forbid." So never he all shook up. The dinner says to Lublina, "Rebbe, read the quittal once more, do me a favor." The Blina's the eyesight is mamish, He says, "I'm seeing very clear, Yaakov and Sola, they'll have children, but they'll die, The dinner says, "Rebbe, please, do me a favor, read it once more." He read it 8 times, Then the dinner says, "Rebbe, so why don't you give them long life, You can do it." So the Holubina heard again. He says, "Yeah, why not?" So then he said to the rich man, "You know what this young man did?" He says, "He mamish opened the gates of heaven for you." Hug around. Remember the Baba told the story? Or you didn't hear it so strong? Because that night when we were there was a yahrzeit of the Holy Dinner. Yeah. What? Which year you mean? How long ago did he pass away? About 130. Tell you a way out story about the Ropshitze. The Ropshitze and the Dinner were like officially arch enemies, Listen to this. When the Dinner became a rebbe, the Ropshitze Mamish said, "It's gefährlich, the biggest piece in the world, he has no right to be a rebbe, and he Mamish wants to stay on the side." So then, afterwards, someone asked the Holy Ropshitze, "What's the matter?" Don't you understand? He said, It's called out in heaven that the Holy Dinner should be a rebbe for 30 years. I want him to live long, so I want him to start later on. Never, That's what it was, It was very holy, Like, what?
That's like the story of the
Reb
yeah,
Nachman, something like that, yeah.